Dan Jackson was looking furiously up at the sky. The ball, he couldn't find it. And the Sanford Stadium crowd was going absolutely haywire. Dan Jackson had just blocked the punt against Arkansas. Zamir White was looking for the ball and found it. Nolan Smith was going crazy. But it was Dirty Dan Jackson who had made his first sort of real big play at Georgia. And then this. Dan Jackson is this guy right here. He's on the ground. He and I were talking about that at the Sugar Bowl. And as Keely Ringo ran to history, Dan Jackson was running right alongside with him. Here's Dan Jackson blocking that punt right there. And Dan Jackson, a multi-year starter at Georgia, was not invited to the NFL Combine today, which I found a very curious reality. And I'm going to talk about that here right now. Of course, you never really know what the NFL wants. They love size, speed, all that stuff. But Dan Jackson case, in Dan Jackson's situation reminds me of the case not that long ago, and I'm not saying it's going to be the same exact thing because Dan Jackson plays a position that's not on the offensive line, okay? But, you know, I followed David Andrews for a long time, from the time he was in high school and in college. He was not drafted, and he went on to be a captain of a Super Bowl winning team at the Patriots with Tom Brady. He was Tom Brady's starting center. I have it on good authority that Tom Brady did not want anyone other than David Andrews to be the starter after a while. So Dan Jackson is going to have the same problem that David had, which is he's going into this thing without a lot of people sort of paying attention to him in a way that you'd maybe suspect they do. Now, let me just say this about the NFL Combine. This is not me. I'm not here to run the NFL down. Those guys, they know what they're doing. Generally speaking, they are, they're vastly more about football than I do. But with that said, I do have to say, Dan Jackson made a lot of plays at Georgia, and more over time. I mean, you could argue, just as a person who observed the 24 season at Georgia, that he was a better DB than Malachi Starks. That's not what the NFL draft is about. People get their feelings hurt about what the NFL draft is about, and this could be the situation that Dan Jackson's in. The NFL draft, not as much as the NBA, the NFL draft is about potential. The NBA draft is only about potential. The NFL draft, generally speaking, is about potential. What do you look like? How, what's your length? All those things. But when you think about Dan Jackson's play against Alabama, the guy had 10 tackles against Alabama and an interception. Against Mississippi, he had 4 tackles and an interception. Very active against Texas and Notre Dame. So when Georgia needed him, he was there for them. But this is a guy that, I do kind of find it curious that a multi-year starter on a team that won multiple national championships would not, and he was, this is how important Dan Jackson was to Georgia. This is the most important play in 40 plus years in Georgia history. Now, I have shared this with Jackson when we were talking. I said, I'm sorry I put you on the cover like that. But Nolan Smith's on the cover. William Poole's on the cover. Obviously, Keely's on the cover. Christopher Smith, who I think is an outstanding player, particularly in college, they're all on there too. What was Dan Jackson? Why did Dan Jackson wind up like that? And is he the only person on the ground? He is not the only person on the ground. The guy that he took a giant shot from Alabama, who was getting his frustrations out, he's on the ground too. Dan Jackson was on the field in the most important moment for Georgia in decades. I mean, particularly for a defense for Georgia. You could make the argument that in 2012, that was just as important a moment when they played Alabama at the Dome. But the defense wasn't on the field at that point. It was Aaron Murray and company. So it is curious to me that he would not get an invite to the Combine. Just because you go to the Combine doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get drafted. And certainly people who don't go to the Combine do. There's only so many people that go to the Combine. Okay, so there's that. But I did find it curious because the sort of former NFL players talking about Dan Jackson, they're not scouts, I get it. But they're quite impressed with him. But it does make me wonder, what does the league look for? Are they looking for a type, like a body type? Because Dan and Malachi, the speed is maybe not the same, but I mean, it's not like Dan Jackson's 5'5" or something like that. I mean, Malachi and Dan Jackson are within 10 pounds of one another. I mean, Malachi's slightly larger. I mean, Warren Brinson went in on it on Twitter saying, how does a 3-year starter on one of the best defenses in the country not get an invite to the combine? And, he was very good at the Senior Bowl. Is it possible, and I don't know the answer to this, is it possible that he just said, I'm going to skip, I did what I needed to do and I'm skipping? That may be possible. I can't, I'm not an NFL reporter. I can't say that. But, Dan could come out and, Dan, you can reach out to some of us and just let us know. We can do the reporting on that. I'm not aware of that. So, maybe Warren has gotten everybody riled up here, but it does seem to me like, Dan Jackson is not going to go in the first couple rounds. So it does seem to me like he would help himself if he did go to the combine. And so the notion that he would, skip it is curious to me. But I don't know. I mean, you're voted the best safety at the Senior Bowl by your peers. I don't know why he wouldn't get an invite, but maybe everybody saw enough of him while they needed to in Mobile. Maybe, he's got something that he can't, do it. I mean, most of the time right now, the only thing that would stop you would be something you choosing not to go. But in this case, you would still go and just not do anything. I mean, guys do that all the time. I mean, the reason why, for those of you who have never, don't know a lot about the combine process or whatever, when Indianapolis is picked for a reason. They have a lot of facilities, not just at Lucas Oil, where this was, not just at Lucas Oil, but also in and around with the convention center. And I mean, it's a huge indoor space. There's a lot that you can get done in Indianapolis. I understand why the combine is there. I don't love Indianapolis. It's freezing cold, but I understand why it's there. The main reason why, if you're a prospect, that you want to go do that is because all of the teams are there. All the general managers, if they have them, like right now, I don't think the Jags have one, but all of the teams are there. The head coaches, the GMs, obviously you have the whole ability to work out. There's interviews with everybody. You can take interviews. You can go to the podium. You can, there's all sorts of things going on. It's just strange. Something strange to me about this. I'm not sure I understand it, but I don't know if there's anything nefarious. Maybe he's not good enough. I don't know. That doesn't seem right to me, because you have a slew of picks, 250, whatever it is. Let me make sure I don't get that wrong. I mean, there's, well, of course, I believe that number can change from time to time because of compensatory picks, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. But, you have seven rounds of 32, so you're well over 200, and then you have compensatory picks, and, like the Jets will get picks for losing Aaron Rodgers, if I'm not mistaken. You got at least 224 just straight up. That doesn't even, count compensatories. So there's all sorts of opportunity for guys deep, in this draft. Is he the number 15 prospect? I would say clearly not. Is he the number, and the compensatories don't come out. I shouldn't even be looking this up because the compensatories don't come out until after the fact with like free agency and so forth. Compensatories are when guys leave that were under contract, or, injuries, or, compensation picks or trades, stuff like that. So there's any number of reasons that pushes that number from 220-ish to like 240 or 250. Dan Jackson's going to get drafted. I don't know when. I'll put it to you this way. I would be surprised if Dan Jackson wasn't drafted. Does he belong at the combine? I mean, it seems like it to me, but again, this is not me judging. This is not me, whatever you want to call it. But I did find it curious that, Dan would not be on there. And I'm full disclosure, I don't know Dan Jackson. I've met him like 3 times or once or whatever it is. But here are the guys from Georgia going to the combine. Trevor Etienne, Dominic Lovett, Arian Smith, who had a good time in Mobile, Dylan Fairchild, Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson, Xavier Truss, Warren Brinson, Ingram Dawkins, Nazir Stackhouse, Mikael Williams, Smile Munden, Jalen Walker, and Malachi Starks. I mean, it looks like there are 3 prime guys that could get first round. I don't think Smile's going to work his way into the first round, but the 3 guys would be Malachi, Jalen Walker, and Smile Munden, and Mikael, Malachi Starks, and Jalen Walker. And the question is, you got 4 guys on the offensive line that are going to the NFL Combine. How many of them are going to work out? How's that going to look and so forth? This is an important time of the year, but Dan Jackson being left out, that means someone is going to grab him and get some value. But it is an NFL draft pick, and those don't just grow on trees. Anyway, tell me what you think about Dan Jackson getting skipped for the NFL Draft Combine in Indianapolis. Let me know.